We hide it forever. It will remain a cancer in the organism of the society.
I never trusted anybody. That was the only way how to survive.
Ha! Wow, I never trusted anyone. The only way to survive. I wonder what he could be talking about. Joining me now from Ottawa, our studio, is Fred Litwin, the boss behind the Liberty Film Festival, the Liberty Lovers Film Festival in Ottawa. Fred, thanks for coming on the show.
Film Festival.
Sorry, I misspoke and called it wrong. Now, tell me a little bit, before I ask you about the clip, tell me a little bit more about the film festival that you host every year in Ottawa.
Well, this is the second year we've done it. This is the Free Thinking Film Festival. Really celebrates freedom, celebrates liberty, celebrates democracy. You know, it's high time we had films that were shown that really celebrated our culture, our freedoms, the things we hold so dear, as opposed to trying to do the exact opposite.
You're so right, and Hollywood frustrates me, and I know a lot of people, because it always seems to come down on the side of bigger government and less freedom, even though it's the product of the freest society in the history of the world, really. I mean, the freedom of expression,
absolutely,
the artistic freedom, even the economic freedom necessary for Hollywood depends on fundamentals that actors seem to rail against editorially. Tell me the date of your Free Thinking Film Festival.
It's going to run between November 11th and November 13th, 2011 here in Ottawa, and we're going to show 23 films. We'll have 2 panel discussions and 1 debate.
Now, I was delighted to participate last year. I'm looking forward to it so much this year, and we're going to have you on a few times more between now and that film festival, just to give people a little bit of taste of some of the films we're showing. Now, when we came in from the commercial break, we had a little clip. It looked like a former Soviet bloc country and people talking about life under that totalitarian regime. Can you tell us a little bit more? What was that clip we saw there?
Well, this film is The Power of the Powerless. It's an absolutely amazing documentary about the Velvet Revolution that toppled communism. This is one of the few documentaries that's actually incredibly exciting. And even though you know the ending, that communism is going to fail, all along the way you are excited and you want to know what's going to happen next. What are the students going to do? What's their next move? How is the regime going to react? It's an incredibly exciting film.
Huh. What day is that one showing?
That's going to be on the Saturday, November 12th.
Oh, that's amazing. Did you bring any more clips with you today?
You sure did.
Well, tell me what's next. What do you have?
Well, I think part of this film is the fact that this was a student revolution, and so Václav Havel, the famous playwright, had provided the backdrop and the underpinning for the revolution, but it was the students who really went into the streets and made it happen, and that's part of the excitement here.
I bet. You know, that comment in the early clip about how you couldn't trust anyone. We know about the politics and the ideology about these evil Soviet regimes, but I think sometimes we forget that these were ordinary people, and even if they were apolitical, they had to live their lives in fear. Let's see the clip that you're talking about, the next one.
Okay, great.
Dissidents such as the outlaw playwright Václav Havel were severely punished.
Zalepkanosti nějakými kompromisy, úhyby, mlčením k nějakému zlu.
Then, in 1989, young Czechoslovaks decided it was time to take action.
Students, you know what? I look at the student protests on Wall Street, the Occupy Wall Street BS. It's so morally incoherent. They're in the freest country in the world. And then I look at these real students in Czechoslovakia who actually stood up against tyranny and tanks. And I'm embarrassed for these fake AstroTurf protesters in Wall Street. What are your thoughts on that, Fred?
Well, it's really embarrassing. I mean, these sort of protests are going to come to Canada next week, and you'll see they're going to be anti-Zionist. They'll have Palestinian flags. They'll be all anti-capitalists. It's going to be really, really ridiculous, particularly given that Canada's done so well. Our banks weren't bailed out. We are thriving, and yet they're going to take to the streets, and for what?
Yeah, and where were those protesters during the Cold War? There were some dissidents. There were some dissidents and some supporters of dissidents in the West. But the biggest rallies during the Cold War, and I was just young then, but I still remember it, the biggest rallies were against America and Canada to unilaterally disarm. We didn't have millions of people in the streets to free Czechoslovakia, to free Russia, to free them. I think, frankly, that the West has some answering, and liberals in the West especially have some answering to do for the fact that we're so silent in the face of true tyranny, but we like these fun protests on Wall Street.
Exactly, and that's one of the reasons I'm showing this film. We need to be reminded what true tyranny really is and what it takes for real liberty.
Yeah. Well, tell me a little bit, and Claude, we only have about a minute left. Václav Havel, who went from being a poet and playwright to the president, tell me a little bit more about how the government tried to shut him down. At what point did he become too public a figure for them to take out?
Well, I think he was very, very public, and they did everything they could to really stop him, and he sort of receded a bit into the backdrop. But his writings were out there. People could get their hand on his writings and could actually read for themselves. But in this documentary, he actually he was in the backdrop as the students took the initiative. But they realized that he was the big moral force, and they came back to him in the end. He became president, and in fact, he guided them in terms of saying, you know what? Let's not have retribution against people for the past. We need to move forward.
Amazing, and a big name narrator, Jeremy Irons, the Oscar winner behind it. So, boy, I'm very excited about this. Fred, we've got to go now, but please promise me you'll come back between now and the film festival and bring more clips so we can tease people. Hey, if you're in the Ottawa area, make sure you go to the film festival. Fred, what's the website just before we go?
www.freethinkingfilmfest.ca.
Thanks, my friend. We'll talk to you again soon. Keep up the great work.